Welcome to Sunday morning, 21 November, Manama Dialogue, 5th and 6th plenary sessions. I would like to begin by thanking very much on behalf of all the key delegates and ministers and national security advisors who were present, His Majesty King Hamad for having hosted last night really splendid dinner at the palace, which advanced defense diplomacy and collegiality amongst all of our diverse participants. It is also with great pleasure that I thank Royal Protocol, the Bahrain Defense Forces, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for assisting us in organizing that event so smoothly. Yesterday, when I mentioned that we had representatives from 40 countries and more than 350 delegates, I might have added that we also have representatives from North America, the Middle East, Europe, Asia, and Africa. And this morning we have a very diverse panel that demonstrates the variety of regions with which the Middle East is necessarily engaged. This fifth plenary session is titled Security Dynamics in the Red and Mediterranean Seas. And the reason we chose that is that both in the Red Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean, there's a variety of different interests that countries of the Middle East and specifically in the Gulf have in these two seas. And we thought it was important, given that our broad theme was multilateralism in the Middle East, but our subtext was the growth of minilateral arrangements within a variety of regions, that we should look at these two seas, as it were. And for that, we're delighted to have with us four splendid speakers. Foreign Minister of Greece, Dendias, Dr. Ahmed Awad bin Mubarak, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Yemen, Eugene Wamalya, the Cabinet Secretary for Defense of Kenya, and coming also, as it happens, from Nairobi, because she is based there, Dr. Annette Weber, who is the EU Special Representative for the Horn of Africa, representing the Europe's External Action Service in Kenya. So without further delay, I'll ask each of them in the order that I have introduced them to say a few words from the lectern, and as was the case yesterday, we'll then have a dialogue with our delegates. So Nikolaos Dendias, Foreign Minister of Greece.
Good morning, everybody. Dear colleagues, well, Doctor, thank you so much for really giving me the floor, and I took the hint, just a few words, so I will follow your advice. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the Kingdom of Bahrain and IISS for allowing me to have this first participation at the Manama Dialogue, a very important venue, if I may say so. Well, you all know that there's a dominant inclination to view the Middle East region through geopolitical lenses, and I cannot be the exception to that. This is a region which constitutes a crossroad of civilizations, religions, and political interests, and also a region affected by many ongoing conflicts, locally generated, but also crossing borders. Libya, Syria, Yemen, dear colleague, are clear-cut paradigms of the multiplying and increasingly intersecting issues the region is faced with. Apart from the impact on the regional security, stability, they have also severe consequences on the wider area. Among others, they create conditions for the growth of two greatly destabilizing factors: migration and terrorism. So, is there any chance we can escape from this vicious circle of violence, insecurity, and instability? My question to this rhetorical answer is an affirmative one. Yes, we can. There is an alternative vision for this region. There is a vision that embraces our rich diversity and our unique historical heritage. One that is based on the common ground of our shared interests. We, Greece, firmly believe in peaceful coexistence and cooperation among all countries of the region. And, of course, this has to be based on the respect of international law, including the law of the sea and the United Nations Charter. This is the solid basis of a good neighborly relation. Guided by these principles, my country is contributing to regional stability and prosperity through three interconnected paths. First of all, we have successfully addressed bilateral issues with all our neighbors, with the exception of one, on the basis of international law. In the space of 1 year, we have concluded international agreements on the delimitation of our respective sea zones with Italy, our partners in the European Union, and Egypt. And also we have agreed to defer to the International Court of Justice in The Hague our differences with Albania. And our goal is to address all such pending issues, taking as basis the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and, more broadly, international law. Second path, we are building regional cooperation schemes along with Cyprus and other countries of the region. Just 48 hours ago, I hosted a quadrilateral meeting with the participation of my counterparts from Cyprus, Egypt, and France in Athens. And last February, I had the honor to host the above-mentioned countries along with 3 Gulf states, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, under the name of Philia Forum. Philia in Greece means friendship. So this is the friendship between the Middle East and between Europe. These cooperation schemes serve the goal of promoting peace, stability, and prosperity, and they have the potential from the Gulf to be extended to the area of the Indo-Pacific. We seek to tackle together regional challenges and share our views. We also seek joint actions in order to address global challenges, such as coping with the COVID-19 pandemic. Addressing the effects of climate change and environmental degradation, it is a huge challenge for all of us. And of course, last but not least, we have to manage water shortages. And please allow me to clarify here, as I do quite often, that these multilateral schemes are not exclusive clubs. They are open to whoever shares our values and principles, that is, the respect of international law and international law of the sea. The third path we're following is that we have taken substantial steps in building bilateral relations with the countries in the region, as well as the regional organizations. On the last couple of years, the government of Greece has invested politically in the Gulf, because the Gulf is, after all, the part of our broader neighborhood. And we are advocating for that in the European Union, because you realize that sometimes, if you're sitting in Brussels, our area seems rather far away. Greece signed last year an agreement on foreign policy and defense cooperation with the UAE, an agreement also that contains a mutual assistance clause. We have recently deployed a battery of Patriot missiles in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Again, Patriot missiles is a purely defensive weapon, as I'm sure you know. And our goal is to help the kingdom cope with external threats, especially attacks against civilians. And also we have signed an agreement on political consultations with the Gulf Cooperation Council. And I have met the Secretary General, if I remember well, at least 3 times this year, and probably will be meeting the 4th time right here in Bahrain. So that speaks for itself. Last but not least, I personally had visited almost all the Gulf countries. We remain committed to build on the foundations I just laid out. Hopefully, this can lay the ground for a broader breakthrough towards conflict resolution. And let us see clearly, the road ahead is definitely long, has many obstacles, but we can walk it towards a better future based on our shared principles and our shared values. Thank you so much.
Minister of Foreign Affairs Dendias, thank you very much for giving us an outline of what is essentially Greece's Gulf strategy, and also reminding your colleagues in the European Union that the Gulf is also a near neighbor of the European Union. It raises, at least in my mind, the question whether the EU, having developed an Indo-Pacific strategy, might seek one day to develop guidelines for the Gulf as well as part of its external action. But we'll leave that to the debate to discuss. With that, could I invite Minister of Foreign Affairs of Yemen, Dr. Ahmed Awad bin Mubarak, to take the floor. Thank you, sir. And while he speaks excellent English, I expect that he will deliver his address in Arabic, so those who aren't fluent, please grab your headphones. Thank you, sir.
In the name of God, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me at the outset to extend my thanks and appreciation to the Kingdom of Bahrain for the generous hospitality and welcome. I would like to thank my brother, His Excellency Dr. Abdel Latif Al-Zayani, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and his wonderful team, in addition to the International Institute for Strategic Studies, for the good organization of this important conference, through which we look forward to presenting a clear picture of the security challenges facing the region and Yemen, and to benefiting from the visions and ideas of the participants in this conference. The war in Yemen is about to complete its 7th year since the Houthi militia launched it against the Yemeni people following the coup against the legitimate authority. This war is dangerous, not only because the Houthi militia is trying to seize power, but it is also seeking to change the nature of the Yemeni society, to derail its future and that of the region through recruiting children on a large scale, indoctrinating young people to incite violence, perpetrate conflict and spread hatred between the inhabitants of the same country and towards the others who are intellectually different. In addition to that, they are trying to spread ignorance in the community to make it easier to control, and they are working on impoverishing it and exploiting its needs to recruit it in wars. All of this provided a fertile environment for making Yemen one of the pillars of Iran's expansionist strategy in the region. The Iranian project is now clear. Its militias are surrounding the Arabian Peninsula, armed with qualitative military capabilities. The danger has widened. It makes no doubt that the failure of the Iranian project in Yemen will ensure the failure of the Iranian project in the entire region. Its success in Yemen will usher a new phase of conflict and lead to another cycle of violence and chaos. In my speech, I will try to clarify where we stand today and what is our vision for achieving peace in Yemen. Excellencies, The Ma'rib Governorate is considered at this stage of the war the focus of attention of those who follow the Yemeni issue. Since last November, the Houthi militia has launched a continuous attack against the Ma'rib Governorate. Such an attack is loaded with grudges that are no less important than the illusion that the militia bears of the possibility of militarily seizing the governorate and the greater illusion of controlling Yemen with violence, terrorism, and military force. The Ma'rib Governorate, with its historic importance, has gained today a national and strategic importance. Many might have forgotten that this governorate had defeated the Houthis in 2015 with modest combat capabilities compared to what it has today, with a population of no more than 350,000 people. Today, it is more capable today. It has become a haven for Yemenis of various social and political affiliations, with a population of 4 million people, among which 2 million who are IDPs. This population is supportive of an army having a national creed and a firm and unbreakable will to end the Houthi project. Despite this, it is necessary to point out that there are miscalculations on the part of some stakeholders who started talking about the post-Ma'rib scenario. If we have a discussion about such a scenario that is unrealistic for us, we will undoubtedly say that if the Houthis control Ma'rib, it will be as bad as when its historically famous dam was destroyed. Today, Ma'rib is the impenetrable wall for Yemen. It has become one of the most strategic priorities of the Iranian regime and its proxies in the region. The fall of Ma'rib will not only lead to a horrific humanitarian situation, it will also mark the end of the political and peace process in Yemen. It will put an end to efforts being made to restore security and stability. Chaos will prevail, more violence, internal strife, and waves of migration will follow. It will be the beginning of a long-term state of instability that might lead to other wars being waged from Yemen towards the rest of the region. Ladies and gentlemen, our vision and approach in the Yemeni government is the following. There is no alternative to peace in Yemen. Any just, comprehensive, and sustainable peace must address the political roots of the war, represented by the attempt by the Houthi militia to impose its control and hegemony by force on Yemen. Despite the destructive Iranian intervention in Yemen, despite its military support for the Houthi militia and its financing of its war machine, treating the war in Yemen as a regional proxy war is a misconception that should be corrected. No peace settlement in Yemen can be successful without Yemenis agreeing on solving their internal problems in accordance with the outcomes of the Comprehensive National Dialogue Conference and the equitable distribution of power and wealth. However, at the same time, it would be wrong to neglect the geostrategic dimension of Iranian interference in Yemen and Iran's desire to get closer to the Red Sea and the Arabian Sea. Such a thing will give Iran a strategic added value in the conflict and will increase regional and international competition. It goes without saying that the Iranian investment in the Houthi movement started early and increased at the beginning of the second millennium. The seizure of the Iranian ships Jihan 1 and Jihan 2 on their way to the Houthis in 2012, i.e. 3 years before the war, by the US Navy while carrying weapons and missiles, proves that it allows us, in fact, to answer those who claim that the current war is, in fact, the reason behind the Iranian intervention in Yemen. Among the misconceptions, we can also mention that Houthis reject peace whenever they advance militarily on the ground. In fact, they reject peace as a strategic principle, whether they are advancing or retreating militarily, and they deal with peace as a tactic within their military strategy. We have dozens of evidence about that. The most clear is probably the Stockholm Agreement, which was accepted by the Houthi militia in December 2018 without implementing any of its provisions. Then it turned against it and completely revoked it in full view of the international community. Understanding this fact helps us to understand the appropriate approach to achieving peace with a group that does not base its calculations on facts, but rather on a theocratic thought based on the illusion of claiming the divine right to rule. This is the severe obstacle that has thwarted all that was agreed upon in all rounds of peace, starting from Geneva to Kuwait and even Stockholm. If we take into account this clear fact, we can say that the most important test for the Houthi militia, a test that it constantly rejects, is accepting a comprehensive ceasefire as the most important humanitarian step to be taken so that all other humanitarian issues can be addressed before going to negotiations to find a comprehensive political solution. We believe that the cohesion and union of all moderate political powers opposing the Iranian project in Yemen is the first requirement to impose a new reality on the ground that pushes towards achieving a political settlement so that the Riyadh agreement can be completed and implemented in addition to the security and military annex, because they constitute an essential pillar for achieving peace and security. The regional and international support for the Yemeni government in overcoming the economic challenges facing it, in addressing the economic situation, in strengthening partnership in the political, economic, and humanitarian aspects pertaining to the Yemeni crisis will no doubt enable the government to maintain a moderate Yemen, a Yemen that shares with the world common humanitarian values and principles. We note the importance of continued and concerted efforts and coordination between countries of the region and the world to put pressure on Iran to stop its subversive activities in Yemen so that the Middle East enjoys security, peace, and stability. Excellencies, achieving peace in our country is enough to curb the militias and to address all problems and issues they have caused in the Yemeni society. This is why we need to deal with flexibility with all initiatives and endeavors aimed at achieving peace in line with our national principles, the Gulf Initiative and its executive mechanism, the outcomes of the Comprehensive National Dialogue Conference, and the Security Council Resolution 2216 to achieve a comprehensive, just and lasting peace to restore security and stability in Yemen. Please allow me, in conclusion, to refer to the catastrophic environmental danger that everyone is expecting without, in fact, making any real effort to avoid it. The leakage of more than 1 million barrels of crude oil stored for 7 years in the oil tanker Safir is a real disaster that will destroy the marine environment of Yemen and the region, especially in the Red Sea and the Red Sea areas. And the Houthis are still holding the tanker hostage. They are refusing to allow the UN team to maintain it. In conclusion, I wish you success in this conference. I hope that you will come up with visions and ideas that help confront security challenges in the region and the world. Thank you.
Foreign Minister, thank you very much for underscoring the strategic importance of Marib and for reminding us of the enormous environmental disaster that awaits us if the Safar is not properly secured. I'm sure in discussion we will also want to examine what the various reasons might be for the stalling of the peace process and whether divisions within the Houthi leadership are an important component of that or whether there are other reasons that can be ascribed to that failure. With that, could I please have the Cabinet Minister for Defense of Kenya address the Manama Dialogue? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Excellencies. May I start by thanking IISS and the Kingdom of Bahrain for hosting this very, very critical forum that has brought together, as you've heard, representatives from 5 continents. We have heard from the US, Secretary Austin was here with us. We heard from Europe, and we had Sir Stephen Lovegrove here with us. And we also heard from Asia, from my 2 colleagues, defense ministers of Indonesia and Malaysia. Today, I'm very, very privileged to be here to add Africa's voice to this dialogue. This is my first time here, but I'm very, very pleased that when I arrived, a colleague of mine told me that the last time he was here, he was with my predecessor, who was in this dialogue in 2019. And he asked me, he thought Kenya's Minister for Defense was a woman. And I told him, no, I'm not a woman, but yes, she was a very able minister, and she represented us here, and I bring her greetings. She was with you, and I'm very, very happy that you still remember her. But today, as we come to talk about the dynamics, security dynamics in the Red Sea region, we are also looking at the Horn of Africa situation. As you're all aware of the fragility of the Horn of Africa region, whether we're talking about climate change, whether we're talking about terrorism, whether we're talking about the ravages of COVID-19, the Horn of Africa region has greatly been affected. And looking at what the leaders have discussed here, I listened to them yesterday, and we know that we might be separated by miles and miles of land, of sea and skies, but we really face very common threats. When you're talking about terrorism, this is also a threat facing Africa, and particularly the Horn of Africa, whether you're talking of ISIS, talking of Al-Shabaab, and talking of other threats, Al-Qaeda, Africa is facing the same threats. In Somalia, the biggest challenge is Al-Shabaab. And from the discussions we've had here today and yesterday, we also draw from our lessons, particularly the sudden withdrawal in Afghanistan and the situation we are facing in Somalia with AMISOM's term coming to an end at the end of this year. We are looking at how we can have a conditioned transition in Somalia so that we avoid a situation where we can have Al-Shabaab resurging and overrunning us. So we will be discussing this with you today to see how that can be managed. Talking of the Horn of Africa, we know the situation developing in Ethiopia, and we are all working very, very closely with Ethiopia, together with the IGAD and AU, to see that the situation does not get out of control. Similarly, we've had threats in northern Mozambique, that is in South Africa, that has affected also Tanzania, as well as Uganda, with the AFD affiliates. You heard of the bomb blasts in Kampala. And terrorism is a real threat to Africa, just as it is to all the other regions of the world. Similarly, climate change and COVID-19 has hit us very, very hard. And these commonalities of our challenges dictates that we work together. And working together is not really a choice, it's an imperative of our time to see how we can overcome these challenges. When it comes to the issue of the increasing global competition in this region, it suffices to say that the Red Sea, and indeed the entire belt of the Gulf region, presents a very unique geographical makeup of a huge geostrategic importance to the Horn of Africa, the Sahel, Asia, Europe, and it is indeed a pivotal gateway in regional and global international trade. It is true to say that in recent years, there has been an upsurge in the interest of regional and extra-regional actors to establish military and naval bases along the Red Sea in pursuit of their interests, owing to the geostrategic output of this region on a number of interesting factors. As a result, we have seen significant proliferation of military bases, which has in turn led to militarization of the Red Sea and the Horn of Africa. The region has also been at the core of strategic calculus of the world, and regional military powers, as was evident during the Cold War, when superpowers projected their military dominance in the region. A similar scenario has currently evolved on a potentially larger and complex scale, a situation that could transform the Horn of Africa and the Red Sea into military fortresses and theaters for competition among several powers. This development calls for a thorough analysis of the situation with a view of establishing the implications, not just for Kenya, but the region, which will, without doubt, project enormous effect into the global sphere. This analysis should give us a window from which we could possibly formulate ways for strategic consumption of our common interests. Kenya has a relatively long coast, and this coastline runs all the way from Vanga to Kiunga. We are talking of over 536 kilometers along the Indian Ocean. And it is indeed true that it suffers, as it would benefit, implication of projection of security dynamics in the Red Sea together with the rest of the East African neighborhood. Kenya's strategic position within the Horn of Africa and its proximity to the web of terror networks has exposed it to terrorism, proliferation of small arms and light weapons, without forgetting the influx of refugees, among other challenges. The pertinent question is, are there traces of occurrence that link security dynamics in the Red Sea to the security challenges that is experienced in Kenya and the East African region today? Ladies and gentlemen, all this dynamic mix of insecurity, geopolitical challenges, with the implications of climate change on our livelihoods in the Red Sea region can be considered to be determinants of regional fragility in which Kenya and its neighbors in the Horn of Africa operate. Kenya pursues a very dynamic policy shaped by a pragmatic approach to the prevailing international geopolitical environment. The foreign policy is principled, among others, on peaceful coexistence with its neighbors, respect for the equality, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of states, and respect for international norms, customs, and laws. Over the years, however, Kenya's foreign policy has undergone transition in response to emerging trends in international affairs, such as globalization, regional integration, and security threats. The dynamic global environment, with shifting interests among states, has led to both political and economic realignments, supported by the imperative to strengthening security capabilities. Kenya continues to reorient its foreign and defense policies and strategies to forge mutually beneficial alliances with traditional allies while constructively engaging the emerging powers. The economic transformation of the country through economic diplomacy has targeted to deepen economic cooperation and international trade. Kenya has therefore pursued broader cooperation to include non-traditional economic partners in various thematic areas, including agriculture, cooperatives, security, education, tourism, mining, transport, among others. In the face of the militarization of the Horn of Africa and the Red Sea, Kenya will continue to pursue its foreign and defense policies and its objectives with a view to protecting, promoting, and projecting its interests in the region and beyond, with respect for mutual development with their neighbors and partners. The Republic of Kenya has experienced a noticeable reduction of economic attractiveness of its infrastructure, particularly the port of Mombasa and Lapsset, as a result of the upgrading of port facilities and infrastructure, such as the new transport corridors that have come up with militarization. Further, it's expected that Kenya's role as a major player in the region is likely to be undermined by the presence of the major powers in the Horn of Africa. I wish to post, ladies and gentlemen, that it's not entirely lost to us that foreign military bases in the Horn of Africa and the Red Sea region may in fact also act as deterrents to invasions of a territory due to the fear of repercussions should the foreign powers decide to defend the host country. Their presence in the region could boost the fight through joint operations, funding, and training with host and regional countries. In addition, they are likely to help illegal immigration across the Indian Ocean and the Red Sea, due to patrols by ships and air surveillance. It's noteworthy that Bab el-Mandab used to be a notorious crossing point between Yemen and Somalia. This has since reduced significantly due to the presence of the EU, UAE, and Saudi Arabian naval forces in the Gulf. Distinguished Excellencies, dear delegates, one might therefore want to ask, what then could be the possible ways in which we could leverage the implications to achieve strategic gains for the common good? And on this regard, a 6-point agenda becomes apparent as I conclude. Sorry, I'm taking a bit long, but I think speaking for Africa, I might be given a little more time. These are the 6 points that I just wanted to highlight. One, although the militarization poses some threats and challenges, Kenya is looking to proactively identify inherent opportunities to be exploited in advancement of our national interests. Two, Kenya is prepared to actively use regional security mechanisms, particularly under the IGAD, the AU, to forge common positions in addressing peace and security issues that may arise from militarization of the Horn of Africa and perhaps project benefit out of it. Three, Kenya is also at the forefront of leveraging the presence of major powers in the region to identify, exploit defense cooperation and collaboration opportunities in areas such as training, capacity building, information and intelligence sharing, counterterrorism, and maritime security cooperation. Four, the need for Kenya to renew regional defense pacts with the countries in the region and strengthening regional RECs for conflict prevention, management, and resolution is of strategic importance to guarantee mutual defense support when necessary. The defense pacts could be pursued within regional frameworks such as the EAC and IGAD or bilaterally. Lastly, Kenya will be looking to expand its diplomatic footprints in the region. The establishment of defense liaison officers and subsequent defense attachés in the region is a priority. This presence would facilitate the implementation of meaningful partnerships, including economic aspects of militarization and the conclusion of defense cooperation arrangements. Further, Kenya will also be looking at enhancing its role in peacekeeping and enforcement, including redeploying forces in South Sudan. As I conclude, Excellencies, dear delegates, ladies and gentlemen, as nations seek to pursue, protect, and project their interest, the militarization of the Horn of Africa and the Red Sea will probably continue. As this trend persists, there will be an increase of actors, particularly considering that some host states have chosen the hosting of military and naval bases for economic purposes. This, therefore, is the main challenge that should preoccupy governments in the region and look at how to ensure that proliferation of military naval bases in the region is not detrimental to the regional peace and stability. More importantly, is how we could all mitigate against any negative implications of militarization and take advantage of the opportunities for the advancement of national interest. Further, we should all come up with ways of committing to address the threat of terrorism that's threatening peace and security in the Red Sea, as well as other places within the Horn of Africa, the Indian Ocean, all the way to Mozambique in South Africa, as I've said, as well as into the hinterland of the African continent. I thank you for your attention, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Minister, for that splendid analysis of Kenya's widening strategic environment, for noting the military buildup in the Red Sea, the proliferation of bases and facilities, and also for inviting us to examine more closely the links between the Red Sea and East African strategic theaters. Dr. Annette Weber.
Thank you very much. Let me thank the Kingdom of Bahrain and IISS first for the invitation. Let me also thank the previous speakers for, setting the scene, building the ground for hopefully a very fruitful discussion that we follow up. My role, I think, right now is more, I see my role now more as connecting some of the dots. And to me, this is also how I see the Red Sea arena. It's really connecting the Mediterranean with the Indian Ocean. It's connecting the western and eastern shore. And so for us in the EU, for me as a EUSR, it's also the question of a Red Sea arena, not just the waterway, but a Red Sea arena that is not just the littoral states, but also those who are shaping and who are affected by the political and the security dynamics in the Red Sea. This, to me, of course, is also a sign where UAE, of course, plays a huge role, and also Ethiopia is playing a role, even so with no direct access to the Red Sea. I'm saying this because I would like to come, back to the transitions we had seen in the last couple of years in Sudan and in Ethiopia. And I think these are some of the core points that are connected to the Red Sea and where we need to come together and have a common solution, because if this is not happening, I think the Red Sea will be affected, the security in the Red Sea will be affected, and as the Defense Minister of Kenya was just saying, the militarization of the Red Sea, Yemen and potentially spillovers from these two conflicts will affect your shore, the Gulf shore as well. As we have discussed maybe yesterday, the shifting minilateralisms, I think, are very clearly seen in the Red Sea. We have old and new actors in this region. We have actors like the Gulf Cooperation Council in various forms, mainly on Somalia. We see a bit of the rift there playing out. We have the EU as a very long engaged partner for specifically the Horn of African Red Sea states. Of course, we have the US, we have China, but we also have some old newcomers. We have Russia coming back, and we have Iran coming back. And I think these are, of course, also issues that we need to consider when we're looking at the stability and the security of the Red Sea. And this can only happen, or we can only engage against it, if the countries in the Horn of Africa get more stability and get a resilience, also a security resilience, that will not make them more, let's say, open to outside disruptions. And I think this is what I would like to come to a bit later. So we have a highly dynamic Red Sea arena. We have a highly dynamic region. It was mentioned before. We have positive and negative connectors and dividers. We have a history connecting to the two shores of the Red Sea. We have a history of trade connecting to the two shores of the Red Sea, but we, of course, also have a history of migration, of traveling jihadis from both sides of the Red Sea. We have a positive history of goods and trade, not just connecting to the two shores, but connecting the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean. For the EU, of course, the Red Sea is a major tradeway. More than 23% of our trade with China and Asia is going through the Red Sea. So there are positive functions of the Red Sea that I think we need to engage on and we need to build on. But of course, there are also conflicting functions, and we've heard from Yemen how the spillover of a conflict in Yemen, to the other side, is basically fragmenting the understanding of the region of the Horn of Africa, but also the understanding of a common security architecture. And I think this is where the critical point is that we're looking at right now. The lack, let's say, of a common security architecture on the Horn of African states, and a fragmentation that makes it much easier for outside interventions to destabilize this region. I think this is where we should have a common interest, especially when we look at the trade and when we look at the positive connectors of the Red Sea, to work on strengthening the Horn of Africa in this sense. I think the risks we see right now are very clear, and I don't want to repeat what others had said before, but the risks that we see specifically in Ethiopia is a risk of a potential civil war spilling over, becoming regional, and affecting, even so no direct access to the Red Sea, affecting the Red Sea security arena and the Red Sea security formations. And I think these are issues where we, even if we might have a division or differences in our understanding of stability, I think we should have a common understanding that a ceasefire in Ethiopia is a core precondition for further stability in the Red Sea and the engagement. Because what we all want is, of course, better cooperation. What we want is secure trade routes. What we want is also better communication and cooperation between the Gulf states and the Horn of African states. For your food security, of course, the Horn of Africa states, specifically Sudan and Ethiopia, are tremendously important for their security and their trade and let's say the economic development. DP World's port economy is tremendously important. And so for all these sides, having stability and having less conflict connectors between these two shores is vital. I think what we need, and it was said before as well, what we need, of course, is a regional concept. We need a regional concept or regional cooperation that goes beyond the bilateral, that goes beyond the transactional, that has something that can be built on in terms of a regional security architecture coming from the countries in the Horn of Africa, connecting to the Gulf states. I think we've seen some of the positive connectors coming from the Gulf states in terms of the mediation and coming to an agreement between Ethiopia and Eritrea just a number of years back. I think that was an opening that was not expected and that was very positive. We've seen the Gulf states being involved in the Abraham Accords, connecting, let's say, Sudan again back with Israel. I think these are extremely important motives and missions and connectors where the Red Sea can be a combination rather than a fragmentation, but these have to be preserved. So it's not just Ethiopia, I think, that we need to look at, but also the stability in Sudan. That is, I think, of everybody's interest, but we might have different ways to get there. However, I think the interest is something we need to look at, because if there's further fragmentation, and it was said before in terms of, jihadism, terrorism as one of the threats, not only in the Horn of Africa, but where Sudan, of course, is a connector between the Sahel and the Red Sea, where the mercenaries and jihadis, Daesh coming from Libya through Sudan, connecting to the Red Sea and having an impact on your security and stability on this side of the Red Sea as well. And I think this is where we in the EU, and in my position my position is not just covering the Horn of Africa, but also has a mandate on the Red Sea. And I think this is important for the EU to think about a larger arena connecting security questions, but also economic potentials. And so what we are engaging on is basically these two sides. The security questions, we have, of course, EU, NAVFOR, Atalanta, it was mentioned before. We are very much involved in AMISOM in Somalia. The security questions in helping the enhancement of capabilities in the naval bases or maritime security of littoral states on the Horn of Africa. But of course, we also have the potential, the economic potential, the green economy, the blue economy inside as well. So we do not just see the Horn of Africa as a region of conflicts, but also a region of potential. And I think this is exactly what you see there as well. Again, there, I think it's important to connect these dots and work on them collectively. And I think the defense minister of Kenya said that, but not without the Africans, but based on an understanding of where Africa and the Horn of Africa is not just in need, but also has a common and collective understanding of its own interests and security strategies. And maybe lastly, just further on the EU side, I think the maritime environment, the economic opportunities, but also what we've learned from the Baltic Seas. Sometimes it's easier to get to something that is less controversial. So environmental aspects of the Red Sea, it was mentioned before as well, might be a way to start into a cooperation before tackling the security aspects, because of course the security aspects is where much more diversion lays, rather than in common understanding of how environment is a connector. And I think these are some of the aspects we are working with very closely with IGAD. We're working with the AU. We're working with the countries of the Horn of Africa to strengthen these capacities, to see that potential, and to go beyond, let's say, a conflict-prone approach into a more positive potential approach. And I think this is where I would maybe just like to come back to the two immediate concerns, or the immediate engagements that I think we need to come together. Again, ceasefire in Ethiopia and a transition in Sudan that is stable and that is holding will have effects on the Red Sea. And if it's not done, I think we will all have to work very dearly and very urgently in getting it done, because otherwise I think the militarization of the Red Sea as a conflict area, and the Red Sea as a connector of, let's say, refugees running away from these conflicts will be more of a problem rather than as a solution. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to the debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's important to underscore that of the dangers of the civil war of Ethiopia becoming regional, and there is a great deal of diplomatic hyperactivity at present to address that issue, not only from international organizations, but also from some of the bigger powers, including the United States. And thank you for underscoring also the shifting minilateralism of the Red Sea, underscoring the subtext to this conference, where we began to talk about multilateralism, but that multilateralism is expressed quite often now through minilateral arrangements. A reminder that you need to put your badge in the microphone and press your button. If you do only one of those two things, you won't appear on my screen. Happily, about 7 or 8 people have done both of those things. I'm going to take several comments from the floor, if I may, and then the panelists can judiciously answer those questions that were most materially directed to them. And could I start from Italy with Benjamin Petrini?
Thank you very much, John. My question is for our distinguished speakers from Kenya and from the EU, and is precisely on Ethiopia. So Ethiopia has been going through a transition, a power transition that is the greatest power transition since the end of the civil war in 1991. It is largely a domestic transition that now has turned into a civil war. At the same time, both of you have underscored the regional and the international implications of the Horn of Africa and the Red Sea region. So my question is, how can we prevent or try to address these two dimensions, the domestic civil war in Ethiopia and the regional context, from becoming entangled into an intractable larger war? And I'm thinking here with all the distinction at Syria. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And from Oman, Mohammed Al-Hinai.
Thank you very much. I have just a couple of questions for the panel. First of all, on Friday, we had the pleasure to go to Combined Maritime Forces and talk to them a little bit about the efforts that they are undergoing. And one specific thing was very poignant, is that piracy in the Horn of Africa has not been eradicated. It's been suppressed. And the fear is, if that we do not continue these multilateral efforts, is that piracy will continue to be a key issue, not just in the Horn of Africa, but in other places. How would the panel, any member of the panel, think that we can best address these concerns so that we can eradicate the core causes of piracy, social inequality, depleted fishing stocks, in the best manner possible? Thank you very much.
Thank you. And from Germany, Ben Schrier.
Thank you, John. One question for Foreign Minister Denias and one for Cabinet Secretary Van Malwa. Foreign Minister Denias, your country recently concluded a defense pact with France, which included a mutual assistance clause. It has been seen by some in Europe and elsewhere as at least implicitly and possibly directed against Turkey. So I wondered if you could outline how, from Greek's perspective, this pact contributes to stability and security in the Mediterranean. And to the Cabinet Secretary, what is your assessment of China's evolving military presence in Africa? Is this a concern from the perspective of Kenya? Thank you.
Thank you. And from Saudi Arabia, Shafia Al-Damar.
My question to Nicola about the progress of Saudi Arabia and Greece relation. How do you assess that in terms of Greece involvement in the region as a whole? And I do have a question. Last night or yesterday we were talking about multilateralism, in particular in the law politics regarding the environment and trade. Now we have the Council of the Red Sea. My question is, what do you think of this trend of multilateralism, in particular the Red Sea environment and trade between those states are implemented in this organization? And how about including other African countries such as Kenya into this? Thanks.
Thank you. And from Yemen, Sagir Aziz.
I would like just to confirm that our national army are defending peace. They are defending peace in Yemen and for the Yemenis as well as for the region and the entire humanity. Our claims are to have the cooperation of everybody in settling this dispute. I would like to reaffirm that Iran is the source of all evil and terrorism in our region. We call upon everybody that this forum takes a position that condemns and stops Iran from intervening in Yemen to stop the sufferings of Yemenis. We would like as well to confirm that anybody who thinks that we can coexist with the Houthis is not correct, because we have already tried them more than once, and the result was that they have taken over the state institutions because we have trusted them that they wanted peace. But in fact, this group does not want peace and only lives in wars. Thank you to the Kingdom of Bahrain for the hospitality, and thanks for the organizers.
Thank you very much, General. And from the Netherlands, Mayor Nurens.
Thank you very much, John. My question is for Minister Wamalwa, and it follows on Ben Schweer's question about China and Africa. The United States Defense Department recently published its 2021 China Military Power Report, which states that China is considering to expand its network of military bases beyond just in Djibouti. And so my question for the minister is whether, or rather how Kenya views the fact that Kenya was listed in one of the list of countries that China is currently considering to build a military base in, and would Kenya ever welcome this in the future? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And from the US, Stephen Kalin.
Thank you. I have a question for the Yemeni foreign minister and another one for the representative from the EU. In Yemen, over the past few weeks, we've seen a realignment of the battle front lines with some withdrawals from around Hodeida by groups backed by the Saudi-led coalition. We've seen the Houthis advance there and made some advances recently in Maghreb. I'm wondering what the political implications are of these changing front lines, and the possibility, we understand that a lot of these decisions were taken by the coalition and sort of blindsided the government of Yemen. How concerned are you about going forward? We know that Saudi Arabia is interested in reducing its role in Yemen. How concerned are you that it might take more unilateral actions to minimize its role while, at the expense of the government of Yemen? And for the representative from the EU, I'm curious about Saudi Arabia's growing role and interest in taking a role in the Red Sea. It tried to build a coalition a couple of years ago, which doesn't seem to have had any tangible results yet, but that was an effort at multilateralism, and they have economic interests, growing economic interests on the Red Sea with some of these development projects that rely on security and stability in the Red Sea. Thank you.
And from Germany, Boris Ruger.
Thank you, John. On Ethiopia specifically, a question for the Minister of Defense of Kenya and a question for Annette Weber as well. How can these external actors that you've spoken about contribute to containing and resolving the conflict in Ethiopia? Are the African Union and IGAD doing enough at this point? And finally, is there a sense of urgency, a sufficient sense of urgency, including at the UN Security Council, given what is at stake?
Thanks very much. I'll take one more and then come back to the panel. I'll remind the panel that they don't have to and indeed shouldn't answer every question posed, but take the two or so that were most clearly directed at them. Dana Allen from the US, and then we'll come back.
Thanks, John. A question to the Greek foreign minister that also expands a bit on Ben Schreer question. A few years ago, the president of France called NATO brain dead, and he was referring in part to a country that is Greece's formal ally, but also a main strategic rival. I'm just at a time when Russian troops are mobilizing on the border with Ukraine, and given your decades-long problems or tensions with your NATO-allied neighbor, I wonder if you have any thoughts on the coherence and the functioning of NATO as an alliance.
Right, well, thank you very much. Why don't we go in the same order again? So invite the Greek foreign minister to deal with NATO and Turkey and the one or two other questions directed to him. Go ahead, sir.
I need a microphone. Oh, it's here. Okay, yes.
We could even remotely turn it on.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And turn it off as
Thank
well.
you so much. I'll try to touch upon 4 questions asked. The first, although it may sound awkward, piracy. Why? Because Greece is the biggest maritime fleet in the world. Although historically it's not easily explainable. I cannot give an explanation myself. Yet again, for us, freedom in the seas is of utmost importance. And of course, it is clear that what only has been achieved up to date is suppression. The question was absolutely right on that. But addressing the root cause will take an enormous effort, and I have to say decades, not just years ahead. But we, as a small country, we don't punch above our weight. What we can do, Greece, is try to help the development effort of many African countries. And we're trying to do it either directly, for example, now we have an ambitious program in which we transfer vaccines to countries of Africa, but also an indirect way we're trying to channel in a more sophisticated way the development aid that the European Union sends to Africa. But it has to be, and it will be, a very long process. I will not take the time to explain the huge geopolitical parameters of addressing those challenges. On the defense agreement with France, thank you so much for the question, because I have to say I have been asked this time and time again after we have signed this agreement, on which I personally have been working, if I remember well, almost 2 years. Well, it's a defense agreement. A defense agreement that copies the actual wording of Article 47, paragraph 2, if I remember well, of the European Union, with a few more explanations of how it will function. It is signed between 2 European Union members and 2 NATO members, and it's against nobody, unless that somebody sees itself as an aggressor. So the question says implicitly against Turkey, if Turkey considers itself as an aggressor. In such a case, it could be against anybody that perceives itself as an aggressor. And I have to say we're very proud for this agreement. We believe that it stabilizes also NATO in the region and works for peace, stability, and prosperity in the region. And by the way, what is not known, although I made a small reference in my speech, we have a similar agreement with the UAE. So it's not just unique with France. Saudi Arabia, thank you for the question. Saudi Arabia is unique. It's unique because of size. It's unique because of the huge importance for the energy balance in Europe, Greece included, but also because of the most ambitious reform program in the Muslim world. So as Greece, a mid-sized European country, this creates a very huge interest. And because we see ourselves as bridge between the Gulf, the Indo-Pacific, and the European continent, and if I may say also the European Union, of which we're a very proud member, we would like to play a role. And by trying to play our role, our limited role, we're assisting the kingdom in defending itself against aggressions. And on NATO, well, there's a huge discussion now because of the initiative of the European Defence Autonomy. We clearly see this as complementary to NATO. And please allow me to say that just 2 months ago, I was in Washington and I signed an expanded defense agreement with the United States, which enlarges the United States' defensive footprint in my country. So we see this as parts of a matrix that, if well done, would create a stable and prosperous region. If not, the danger is always there. You know, it is not for nothing that the term Balkanization has been framed in the 19th century. So, what we believe that Greece can offer is to create this framework of peace and stability in the region. And the agreements we have signed and our membership of the European Union, I think, work towards that direction. Peace, stability, and prosperity. Thank you.
Excellent. Foreign Minister of Yemen, 2 minutes.
Just 2 minutes?
Yeah, but you'll get another 2 in 20.
Well, first responding to the questions about Hodeidah. You know the situation in Hodeidah in 2018, there were a liberation operation to liberate Al-Hodeidah. And at that time, we faced huge pressure from the international community, from the INGOs, the humanitarian field, pressuring not to go far and liberate Hodeidah because that will have implications on the humanitarian situation. And we responded to that. We freeze the operation and we went to Stockholm and we agreed on what's called Stockholm Agreement. Hodeidah was one of the 3 files discussed during Stockholm. But during the last 3 years, since 2018 up to now, if you evaluate the situation there, security-wise, military-wise, humanitarian-wise, it became worse than before. And also it gave Houthis an advantage and privilege by ensuring that they will not have any military operation in this part of the country. And they remobilized, they redeployed all their forces, and they start attacking Marib heavily since February 2020. And they start threatening, Shabwa, and they made some advances, while most of our troops are, bonded by the Stockholm Agreement and, staying in this part of the country. So what happened, it's kind of redeployment to remobilize all the forces that we have. And if you are following the news, you will see that a lot of military advancement by the Yemeni army took place, and we succeeded to liberate IISS 2 days ago. We made advances in Taiz, and also we strengthening our position in Marib. During the last 3 years, more than 30,000 violations by Houthis to the Stockholm Agreement in Hodeidah. The UNMAHA, which is the UN mission for Hodeidah, they were hostage in an area controlled by Houthis for since the beginning of this mission. So it's a strategical move. It will have direct or positive impact on the other fronts. Regarding reducing the KSA reducing their presence in Yemen, I don't see that. And I mean, we all heard the statement made by the Arab Coalition. Always there was a very symbolic boots on the ground by the Saudi army. The one who are fighting in the ground are Yemenis. We are getting airstrike support, intelligence support, but I'm sure still this is strategical issues for KSA. Houthis are threatening and using Yemen, threatening the Saudi Arabia. You know that sometimes in daily basis, drones and ballistic missiles attacking civilian objects in Saudi Arabia, including airports. So without resolving this problem from its roots, I think Yemen and Houthis in Yemen will stay threats for the Yemeni people and for the rest of the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you very much. I think I'll respond to the one on Ethiopia. Of course, Kenya is Ethiopia's immediate neighbor, and we're really concerned by what is happening there. In just a few days, our President Uhuru Kenyatta flew in, and I think he's the only president who's gone there in recent days to address the situation. And we are following it very, very closely. But we are also working through the AU, and the AU has appointed the former president for Nigeria, Obasanjo, who's been on the ground working with all the teams towards finding a peaceful resolution of the matter. The IGAD also is engaged, and we have shortly a meeting chaired by President Museveni of Uganda, also to bring the region together to address the unfolding situation in Ethiopia. For Kenya, we will be definitely affected if things get out of control, because we have a very long border with Ethiopia, and we are likely to have a huge refugee influx into Kenya. Already, as we speak, Kenya hosts the largest refugee population in the world, over 600,000 refugees in our Kakuma camp in Turkana and the Dab camp in Wajir. So it's a situation that we would want to do everything to avoid and to prevent, and we're calling upon the world to work with us to ensure that it's put under control. When it comes to the issue of piracy, I want to agree with the speaker that indeed we have suppressed piracy. We came together, and particularly piracy off the coast of Somalia. Because of our working together, we have contained it, but it's only suppressed. We have not eradicated it. So we still need to continue working together. Let's not take our eyes off the ball. When it comes to China, I just want to confirm that as I did emphasize in my speech, our foreign policy is really that of continually engaging our traditional partners, but we are also open towards deepening cooperation with other economic partners. As to whether specifically we have engaged China to establish a new base in Kenya, that is not correct, but we are working with China in many other aspects, and China cannot be ignored as one of the emerging powers, as all of us have acknowledged. Thank you.
And Dr. Weber, I think there was one or two for you.
Thank you very much. Just to follow up on Ethiopia, I think just a couple of observations. We all very much are behind the AU appointee Obasanjo, and we're also very happy that the region is taking Ethiopia now as a regional issue and is engaging. Our role, definitely, or my role, is also keeping some of the channels open, traveling, talking to Prime Minister Abiy on a very regular basis in Addis, but also talking to the other side, to approach something that is still lacking. That's the mutual recognition. The two sides are not recognizing each other as political entities that will remain to be political entities in whatever Ethiopia will become, in the war to come or in a peace to come. We were talking about balkanization. I think this is really what we're looking at if there is no very urgent and immediate understanding that a ceasefire right now is what it needs. We have different interests. The other side would like to have maybe a political dialogue before the ceasefire. I think our understanding, and I think this is also the understanding of Obasanjo, the AU, and the region, but also the Americans, is the ceasefire is the priority. We need to stop this war because right now, and this is what I was alluding to before, connecting the northern Ethiopia conflict to the instability or to the coup in Sudan, where we don't know if it's coming back to, let's say, a cooperation between the military and the civilians. If this is not helped upon, then of course the connection between the east of Sudan, Fashaka, the question of Eastern actors who are close to the military leaders will play a role. So we already see, we see weapons traveling, we see coalitions changing and alliances changing, and I think for the region this is really a burning issue that needs to be tackled. Both of these issues needs to be tackled, and I think this is where we all need to come together with this priority. I think the question of the urgency of the UN. I said before, I'm very happy that the AU is taking this role right now. But of course, we also felt for the last couple of months, that neither UN nor the AU were very urgently engaged. So I think it's important that this new urgency, that this new engagement, region and AU, is now coming to unfold, coming into the process and can do something. So. Rather than lamenting on the lack of engagement, I would really like to support the engagement we see right now. However, I do think the transition that we've seen, this is a larger issue. Can we come back to this transition in Ethiopia? Can we come back to the reform agenda? Can we come back to an understanding that Ethiopians, citizens of Ethiopia, will feel that they are all part of that country? Because the rhetoric, the hatefulness, we have an element in this war that is basically the cyber war element that we have not seen in any of the other regional conflicts. The mobilization along ethnic lines, the disintegration of the ENDF, all these aspects will require much larger engagements rather than just the ceasefire. However, without the ceasefire, I think it's very difficult to look into these next steps. Piracy, I think, just to add a couple of questions, absolutely, it's not solved. But I think on the question of piracy in Somalia, this is where the multi-dimensional effort is really necessary. The question of governance, the question of who is taking over responsibility, the question of economic growth, the question of security, and I think this is where we all work together in terms of AMISOM, the capability of coast guards. But of course, it needs also the Somali government and center as well as federal member states to take that responsibility to compete on governance. So for pirates and for Al-Shabaab, it's not so easy basically to take people to their side. I think so. It remains to be a multi-dimensional effort. The question, can it be solved? I think this is a long-term question. Lastly, of course, also the responsibility of fishery is playing a role, and this is where the EU has to be much more self-critically engaging in our own fishery engagement in this region. So thank you very much for that.
Super, thank you very much. I'm going to squeeze in 4 or 5 quick remarks just to get the widest diversity of views. So from Kenya again, Francis Omonde Ogalia.
Thank you very much. I would like to appreciate the speakers for the views that we have had. And I have a short question for Dr. Annette Weber. In the region, we appreciate the funding that EU has given to all the counterterrorism efforts through AMISOM and other initiatives. It is true that much has been done to reduce terrorism, but it's also true that there's significant proliferation of terrorists in the region. Now, the vibe we are getting unofficially is that there is fatigue in funding, but what we are saying is because of the proliferation of terrorism, there's likelihood to develop new initiatives that might require more funding. Is it true that there's fatigue and reluctance by the EU to continue funding counterterrorism efforts in the region? And if so, what are your comments? Thank you.
Hassan Al-Hassan from Bahrain.
Thank you very much, John. My question is addressed to the Greek foreign minister. Greece's relations with the Arab Gulf states, Saudi Arabia and the UAE especially, have grown recently largely on the basis of a shared threat perception vis-à-vis Turkey. Is Greece worried that the recent de-escalation in Turkey-Gulf relations going to have an adverse effect on the support it receives from the Arab Gulf states? Or do you instead view this as a positive development that could have positive spillover effects onto your own relations with Turkey? Thank you.
Thank you. And from Germany, Bastian Giegerick.
Thank you, John. I have a question for Dr. Weber as well. Dr. Weber, you spoke about the need to reduce the conflict connectors, I think you said, and instead find ways to boost and strengthen positive connectivity. And if we project ourselves forward a couple of months, the EU will release the strategic compass, drafts of which are now circulating. If you were holding the pen for a minute and could insert one thing into that document that would help you to reduce the conflict connectors and boost the positive connectors, what would it be? Thank you.
Great. 2 sentences on that. Shahad Turkestani.
Yes, good morning. My question is to the Yemeni Foreign Minister. So you've explained the complex situation inside Yemen and how the Houthis are not in any way trying to cooperate to find a political solution. I think the question, or maybe not only me, but the rest of the people here are wondering is, the international community has tried different conflict management tactics and methods to solve this, all the way from sanctions to dialogue and recently peace negotiations and the peace deal. From a Yemeni perspective, what's the piece of the puzzle are we missing here? How will the Houthis be? How can we convince the Houthis to sit in the table and accept the peace agreement? Thank you.
Thank you. Basima Halawawu.
Thank you, John. My question to Dr. Ahmed Awad. As a subject matter expert, I noticed that the Houthi and the Iranian-backed militia skillfully and collectively exploited the social media to amplify their narrative. In your opinion, how can the Yemeni government counter this narrative with its limited resources? Thank you.
And finally, David Ray.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm also the director of NATO Strategic Direction South Hub. A question for the Secretary of Defense of Kenya. Looking at the multifaceted challenges that the strategic area is facing, including the water dispute involving possibly Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt, the possible Talibanization process that you mentioned of Somalia, the active role of China in the Red Sea, and also the potential role of Russia in Port Sudan. Do you see the role of IGAD moving from an authority for development into mainly a security organization in the region? Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll come back to the panel. We have to close in 5 minutes. So essentially, one question each. I think for Dr. Weber, you're holding the pen for the EU Strategic Compass. You are representing this region. What are the 2 or 3 sentences you write in there to have the greatest impact in solving the connectivity between these conflicts? Dr. Weber.
Well, it's exactly this. It's the regional approach. This is where the connectivity lays. And I think if we continue thinking more in silos, looking at the Gulf, not connecting it to the Horn of Africa, looking at, so the connectivity, the regional connectivity in both ways, in terms of conflict connectivity, but also in terms of solutions. I think we have to become much more maybe minilateralists in terms of how we approach the problem. But in terms of analysis, we have to become more regionalists and look at these nexus, look at the connecting rather than just the dividing factors. And I think, if you allow me, this also leads me to the question of terrorism and funding for this. I don't see a fatigue. I think it's the question of are we continuing an approach that is more of the same, or do we have an approach that is multi-dimensional, where we have various understandings of what's the basis of what are the root causes, but what is also the answer, reaction to terrorist threats. And I think this is where the understanding of having, again, a regional approach, not just silos. It's not just Somalia, for example. We see, of course, Shababis now moving along the Swahili coast, potential of Ethiopia. This is what we have to reflect upon and then look at it, not just in a one-case scenario. And I think this is where we need to become more flexible, maybe flexibility as the second factor, and what are the needs? What are the needs to really get to where we need to get to? Governance needs to be included, of course, the socioeconomic factors, and the mobility to move in terms of CT operations. We can engage on the discussion on AMISOM on this. I think this is where most of the TCCs agree. We need a different reconfigured AMISOM to really encounter these questions, but this cannot be the only factor. It has to be in the bigger package of governance, politics, and of course socioeconomic factors as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. IGAD and water.
Thank you very much. I think I just want to agree with David Gray that when it comes to IGAD, you cannot separate development from security. And I think without peace, really, there can be no development. That's why, with the threat of what's happening in Ethiopia, the current chair, His Excellency President Yoweri Museveni, has called for an IGAD meeting to look at what role IGAD can play in the developing situation. And just beyond that, we're also facing climate change challenges that has also resulted in a resource-based conflict in the region. And these are also some of the areas that IGAD is addressing through cross-border programs to address scarcity of water, building of dams, so that instead of cross-border conflicts, we would like to see more cross-border trade. So these are some of the areas that IGAD is expanding into, and I want to concur with you on that aspect. Thank you.
Super, thank you very much. And the difficult question of getting the Houthis to the table, maybe you can address the question of whether you think the Houthi leadership is divided, and that is a reason why there's been so many difficulties.
The main problem that we faced in all the round of talks was the Houthi ideology, the hardliner, and their influence. We always appreciate all the international intervention, the UN Bath envoys whom we worked with them, and we fully support all their works. But if you ask me to evaluate, one of the mistakes that we all made, that Yemeni crisis tackled just from humanitarian angle, as it is caused by a natural disaster, not by a man-made cause. Always the pressure of the humanitarian situation, the catastrophe that we are facing, which is genuine and real, but that was the driver of any initiatives. Always we discuss what we call, building the trust, improving the situation. We never approached the problem itself, the cause of the problem. Most of these talks were more process-oriented than result-oriented. I believe without changing the facts on the ground, Houthis will not come at all to the table. We experienced that in Stockholm, before Stockholm, weeks before, they have been invited to Geneva, they didn't show up. Then when they faced the Hodeidah pressure, they came to the table without changing, without three priorities: defending Marib, having functioning government from Aden representing all Yemenis and serving all Yemenis, dealing with the economical challenges, unifying all the forces anti-Houthis, I think without resolving and dealing deeply with these 4 or 3 issues, it will be difficult to see the Houthis on the table. We were always, you talked about the narrative, Basma. Narratives have been changed, especially the last 2 years. Now it became very, very obvious about the ties between Houthis and the Iranian, the violation that Houthis are committed in different places in Yemen. It became more easy. I served in DC 4 years at the beginning of the war, and it was very difficult for us. The narratives that war, as the war in Yemen is by the Saudis on Yemenis. It's a proxy war. There is no that ties between the Houthis and the Iranian. All these narratives has been changed. Unfortunately, it took 7 years, but I can tell you, there is much better understanding now, including the sanction. You remembered when the last few days of Trump administration, when they listed the Houthis in the FTO. Now there is, better understanding how Houthis received this step and how they interpret it wrongly, and it has a negative impact on the ground. So yes, as a Yemeni government, we have very limited resources, but in coordination with all our brothers in the region, and the violation that Houthis committed on the ground, helped us a lot.
Thank you very much. And the big question for the Foreign Minister of Greece, does possible détente between Saudi Arabia and the UAE with Turkey help the possibilities of a Greek-Turkish détente?
Well, first of all, let me again clear this. Our relations with the Arab world, it has nothing to do with Turkey. It was a relation of centuries and centuries. If you go to the Bahrain Museum, you will find Greek coins. We have been here for thousands of years, and we have excellent relations not just with Saudi Arabia and with the UAE, but also with Bahrain. I was in Oman 3 or 4 weeks ago. This has nothing to do with Turkey. Now, if Arab countries persuade Turkey to play by the rules, that is, to accept international law of the sea, and become a member of the new architecture of the region, which will create peace, stability, and prosperity, so far the better. And I would be really the happiest of persons to see that happening. So any contact in the region based on principles, I think it is something that is positive, and we should all help it happen. And hopefully, we will see eventually Turkey changing its mind and playing by the rules. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to all 4 of our speakers for animating a genuinely wide-ranging but also very detailed debate with a number of strategic policy suggestions embedded within. Could you all please join me in thanking our speakers and returning here at 11:30 for our final session. Thank you.